They often say, don't they, that royal scandals, well, there's nothing new. And I don't know about you, but if you've ever looked into British royal history, what you find, in fact, is that truly there is nothing new. What you actually find is that it's all gone on before, and particularly if you look in the Georgian era and importantly the first Elizabethan era. What they got up to then was, well, mind-blowing in many respects. But of course it was a court, wasn't it? And not many people were reporting on it. And the gossip stayed inside that court. Of course, there were rumours and, all that sort of things abound. But really, it wasn't like today. Whatever you do is literally out there within minutes. And as Harry and Meghan have found out, the good and the bad. But of course, this wasn't really just all down to them. You see, as I've often said, way back in the sort of, 20th century, there was this one couple that really made a splash, and some say for all the wrong reasons. Not just for meeting people like this, but of course what they tried to do to raise money. Even though they'd been given a very nice hefty allowance, seemingly it was never enough. You see what I mean about history repeating itself? As ever, let me explain. Hi, nice to see you. Thank you so much as ever for joining me today. Lovely to have your company. It's one of those things, isn't it, that you look at when you're younger and you kind of think to yourself when you're studying it, say, at school or whatever, and you think, wow, these people had so much money, but seemingly it was never enough. They could never seemingly have, what they needed because there was always more. Somebody else was richer, all that sort of stuff. It's like the Hollywood studio system, That person was named the most successful star, the highest paid star in the world, and suddenly, the year after, somebody else is looking at that. I remember the wonderful actor Mickey Rooney telling me that literally in 1938, 1939, he was called in to the office of Louis B. Mayer alongside the then president, and he was told that actually he was great for the economy because he was now the highest paid actor, not just in Hollywood, but in the world. He was around about 19-20. Imagine, right? But of course, the scandals go on, and this was the biggest scandal, wasn't it, when you think, there we have, Edward and Mrs. Simpson. And seemingly you would have thought that he married for love. He gave it all up for the woman that he loved because he wanted a different lifestyle. And so when he made that very famous radio announcement, everybody thought, well, that's it. We've now got somebody new on the throne, King George. There's a whole brand new succession line. And suddenly he was going to go away and literally have a totally different life. How wrong could they be? You see, Edward was a thorn in the royal side for many, many years. Now, where it gets interesting for me is this side of the story about how they still wanted to make more money. You see, they were living very lavishly, you have to remember. And for a while, a lot of things were given to them free. Free travel, free hotel accommodation. And we saw it all, didn't we? If you remember, Harry and Meghan at the Carlisle or whatever it was in New York. Everybody wanted them because they could say, wow, they've stayed there. A couple of years down the line, it's not really that advantageous. And suddenly you need to start paying, and perhaps you're not being given the very best suite. This particularly didn't bother Wallis Simpson, according to that source, but it did bother the ex-king. He really, really liked living well. I mean, he'd been born to it, She'd grown accustomed to it. Of course, she loved jewellery, fashion, and the latest, makeup and hair designs. That all cost money too, as he pointed out to her on a number of occasions. So they came up with this, which when you look deep in the archives, it's fascinating to see. You see, they got invited to many different award ceremonies, the biggest things of the day, the Academy Awards, the British Film Awards that were not here, but actually over in Cannes and places like that. And they thought having a splash of an ex-royal milling around, quaffing drinks would be very good for publicity. But you see, the king, the ex-king, decided that no, he could actually make more money on his own. And he wanted to put together his own awards. Think of a bit like the investitures that we see at Windsor Castle. He figured that still his name alongside Wallis, who he expected people to call Mom and curtsy to, still had some cachet. And he came up with this plan of which he was going to team up with an incredibly, shall we say, rather shady newspaper proprietor to fund the whole project. Now, many people may know that this particular proprietor had that magazine called Confidential, right? A big splash in the 1950s. And so consequently, while the idea was still there and he was always looking around for somebody else to fund it, sadly for the ex-king alongside Wallace, their idea of having their yearly award ceremony, which in fact they may host, and it could have been on broadcast radio and indeed the burgeoning television system, well, it never actually came to fruition. But they figured they could make literally rather a lot of money, in today's terms around £1 million. So when I said at the start of the video, people who have decided, of course, to try and make money, stay relevant, and of course, nothing's new, well, does this really have any difference to what, say, certain charitable foundations are doing today? It's all about raising profile, keeping the money coming in, and more importantly, making sure people remember you. But sadly for the ex-king and Wallace Simpson, their dreams of becoming, shall we say, superstars of the award world never truly took off. And that wasn't so confidential. Neil Sean in the very heart of London.